Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. This is a program about things that are kind of out of the mainstream. I guess we kind of pride ourselves on that. I'm one of your hosts, Dan Hall, and with me is my co-host, including our guest, our co-host, Dave Jinks. Dave, you and I have been doing this program, I figured out 13 years.
Mhm.
That's a lot of time to do this
Wow.
program. You
Wow.
know, have we figured out what we're doing? Maybe not. I don't know.
Leave that up to the listeners, and the answer
Yeah, yeah, that's
sometimes
true.
yes, sometimes no. But we have fun doing it. We've learned a lot from our guests, and tonight's guest is no exception, definitely.
Yes, tonight we have somebody we've had on before, Gwen Farrell, who we've come to know and value. And she's going to be talking about something a little bit different than in the past. Gwen has been associated with MUFON in the past and now something called Opus, which I'm familiar with. And the other news about Gwen is that sometime after the first of the year, she's going to become one of our co-hosts. So we'll get to see quite a bit of her. But anyway, so Gwen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate
Okay.
what you guys have done for all these years, and you just keep rolling, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, let's hope anyway. So tonight's topic is walk-ins. And when I first heard that, I said to myself, well, is she going to contrast people that walk in versus people who go through the drive-through? And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, she's not going to be talking about that. So tell us about what a walk-in is. And you have a PowerPoint slide that show that you want to share with us. So take it
Right.
away.
Okay, thank you. This is a little PowerPoint I have prepared to give to groups, and so it may be a little bit formal, but hopefully you will enjoy it, find it interesting, and then I'll be more than happy to discuss or to answer any questions that you may have when it's done. So please let me know if you can't hear me, or can you see the three pictures on top of my slide, or can you just see the slide?
I can see the three
Yeah,
pictures.
yeah.
Okay, I'd like to be able to remove that. Is there a way that
Okay.
you guys know how to get that off?
I should be able to do that here.
I just don't, I don't want to be just, to distract from the slides.
I it's gone for me. Is it gone for
Wait a
you?
minute. Show
I
grid
still
video.
I still
Whatever.
have it
Oh,
for some
you
reason.
Yeah, so do I. I'm trying to see how I can do this. Sorry to take time like this.
oh,
Let
it's
me see if I can just push it up in
Oh,
here.
wait, hide
I
thumbnail.
think that'll
Okay.
be okay. Okay,
I
all right.
I just hid the thumbnail photos and it left.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just leave mine where it is if that's okay with you guys, and we'll get started today. So,
oh sure.
um, I know you guys are all about anomalies, and walk-ins is something that is definitely an anomalous experience. So that's one reason I wanted to share with you today. I thought the listeners might be interested. So what we're going to talk about today is walk-ins, what they are and what they are not. Now, traditionally, the topic of walk-ins has been relegated to the field of paranormal and fantasy. But as we look more carefully at the varied types of human experiences that happen, and when we try to increase our understanding of individual and universal consciousness, things like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, UFOs, and walk-ins are being reported together more frequently. We now accept that everything to do with the human mind is part of consciousness, and that includes walk-ins. The term walk-in is used to mean many different experiences, but today we're going to talk about the traditional definition of walk-ins, which are a very rare occurrence because they're very complicated arrangements. Walk-ins involve two souls with two separate karmas and life plans that has to be considered and coordinated. They don't just happen because somebody wants to find out what it's like to walk into and live in somebody else's body for a while. Many people have psychic or spiritual contact with non-human beings and describe different experiences, but most of those are not walk-ins. Let's go forward. The walk-in experience has been lived, told, and written about since before recorded time in the myth, legend, and religions of nearly every culture on earth. Saints, holy people, and especially gifted humans have been here to help humanity grow and evolve in many different areas. Walk-ins first appear in Hindu sacred literature. Throughout history, walk-ins have been regarded as everything from scary stories told to keep children quiet to the basis for some of our deepest, most sacred esoteric beliefs and teachings. And walk-ins are still with us. Modern interest in walk-in phenomena was initially stimulated in 1970 by Jane Roberts in her series of occult books, who she claimed were channeled by a discarnate entity named Seth. Many people are familiar with the Seth books. In 1979, Ruth Montgomery contributed to the fascination with her book, Strangers Among Us, which has now become the Bible of walk-in phenomenon. In her book, she included prominent historical figures, such as Thomas Jefferson, as being walk-ins. Western science does not admit the existence of experiences like walk-ins, and no large formal studies or investigations of them has been done. So what we know today about them has come to us through the experiencers themselves, the souls and the human beings who have been there and done them. So I wanted to start today with a typical walk-in story in her own words. In 2007, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of fast-growing breast cancer. I had always been a healthy person, including being a long-term vegetarian. Upon hearing the word cancer, I went into a type of shock. I moved through the process of diagnosis, surgery, and treatments like an automaton. I had a radical mastectomy to one breast, and after several months of healing, began a round of chemotherapy. I reacted very badly to the chemo, spending most of my time throwing up, and every joint in my body hurt. When I was finally done with the chemo, I took a couple of months to heal, then prepared for reconstructive surgery. That's when things got weird. During all of my treatments, I had experienced a mental quiet that was very uncharacteristic for me. I accepted my situation without resistance, and I found myself ready and willing to live or die at any time. I was completely at peace, which was also not like me. The reconstructive surgery lasted over 6 hours, and when it was over and I was awake, everything was different. I felt totally disconnected with my old life, and when I looked at photos of my life before the surgery, I didn't recognize myself. Before the surgery, I was a regular pot smoker, but afterward, I had no desire to smoke pot. After being a vegetarian for 20 years, I now found myself to be an avid meat eater. I felt out of place among my friends and family and felt no connection to my husband, which resulted in a divorce and moved back to my childhood hometown, where I started a completely new and happy life, DW. So let's start out by talking about what walk-ins are. In a walk-in, it may be possible for a living human soul to leave a person's body and for another soul to walk into that body. Walk-ins are also called soul switches or soul swaps because, as I mentioned before, they are soul transactions. A walk-in is a person whose original soul has left their body and it has been replaced by a different soul that's new to that person. It is a soul transaction that affects a physical body. A new soul enters and the old soul is released back to the soul realm, and the new person goes on their life. Walk-in souls may be from Earth or for other planets, and they are usually adult souls but sometimes babies are reported as well. An agreement is made between two souls, either before birth or during life, for the benefit of the person and the walk-in. This is essential. If a person offers their soul in exchange for another soul without some kind of prearranged agreement, they risk having their body being taken over by a lower level entity, like demonic possession or some type of attachment. Before the permanent walk-in actually happens, sometimes there will be a trial period between the new soul, the walk-in, and the living person, the walk-out, for short periods of time. A trial period like this can ease the eventual soul transfer and give the walk-out a chance to change their mind before going forward. In a trial period, the living person may notice the presence of the other soul. It may seem like someone is hovering near the person in a non-threatening way, or the person may feel the presence of the new soul in a meditative or dream state. The presence of the other soul should not be frightening or negative in any way. If it is, it's not a walk-in. If the living soul changes their mind for any reason, they can cancel the walk-in and it won't happen. This probably doesn't happen very often. And when it does, the person may think that they're actually experiencing something else, like maybe an out-of-body experience or even a near-death experience. Walk-in souls are not possession. They are never co-opted, abducted, or switched against a person's will. Walk-ins usually happen during a period of intense personal problems on the part of the living soul, or if the person was in an accident or trauma, but there are variations to how this can work. Over time, the walked-in soul will become accustomed to their new body, and they will integrate their own emotional, mental, and spiritual consciousness with the new life, and evolve that life to resonate with their new purpose and intentions. And over time, they will become happier and healthier. Sorry, back up there. Here we go. As I said before, walk-ins are transactions between two souls. They are rare, highly structured, and perfect illustrations of the importance and power of the human soul. Some of the world's greatest spiritual leaders, scientists, and philosophers are believed to be walk-ins. Buddha, Gandhi, Jesus Christ, great artists like Leonardo da Vinci and others. But most people who become walk-ins are just normal people who live their lives quietly and do their missions. Walk-ins are not gods, and they're not perfect. They are souls that have lived many human lives and have chosen to make themselves available to help others on the physical plane, and who wish to continue advancing spiritually without having to reincarnate and live another complete life. So now that we know what walk-ins are, what are walk-ins not? As I said before, a walk-in isn't something that souls do just for fun, just because they want to see what it's like to live in another person's life. It's very serious and very difficult to accomplish because souls must be matched according to their karma and their soul life journey. Although there are some similarities that we will talk about in a while, basically, they are very serious. These are some of the things that they are not. Walk-ins are not hauntings. They are not demonic possession. They are not spirit attachments. They are not mind control. They are not the same thing as ET, human hybridization. They are not alien, supposed to be abductions. And they are not mental illness, although there are many similarities between walk-ins and mental illness. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So why do walk-ins occur? The motivation for walk-ins is always humanitarian. moving into the body of a living human to rescue the soul from an untenable life and to help the new soul grow and flourish. Some of the reasons would be because the living person's higher self may have plans for the soul in a newer, better lifetime. When there are two souls, one on a higher plane and the other on the earth plane, the souls may be able to switch places for the benefit of both. The walk-in process allows a person who no longer wants to remain in an earthly life a way out without physical suffering and damage to the body. The most common reason that we understand for walk-ins is the desire to cut a life short due to suicidal feelings that won't subside. In that case, the soul can leave without harming the physical body, and the new soul will get a new healthy body to move forward into. A walk-in is really an efficient system that allows a developed soul quick access to an adult body, bypassing the need to spend 20 or 30 years in the stages of childhood, growth, and development. Walk-ins are souls who have successfully completed many incarnations. They have attained wisdom and sufficient awareness of the meaning of life. Motivations for walk-ins is always humanitarian. Walked-in persons usually exhibit some type of ability, talent, wisdom, or knowledge in certain areas that they didn't have previously. So what occurs after a walk-in? After a walk-in has taken place, now the original soul will be gone, and the new soul will try to sort of rewire the person's physical, emotional, and mental structure to make the body a better fit for itself, which, as you can imagine, is a major adjustment. The walked-in soul may remember the body's previous memories, but will not have the same emotional attachments to them that it did before. A walk-in experience is not easy. After waking up from a transfer, a person may not immediately even be aware of what happened. If they are consciously aware of what happened, it can be intellectually and emotionally very confusing, and they may have thoughts and feelings that they don't understand. If the body is finding it hard to integrate the new soul, physical issues can arise and can manifest in symptoms such as rheumatoid arthritis, partial paralysis, allergies, depression, and a general feeling of just wanting to die. But the good news is these will pass soon without medical or psychological intervention because they are not psychological or physiological illnesses. They are soul exchanges. The person will find that their tastes, likes, dislikes, and habits have changed drastically. The original person might have been a smoker and led an unhealthy lifestyle, while the new soul will have a desire to give up bad habits and live in a healthier way. Personalities and lifestyles may be different. The person may change where they live, their religion, or their career. Many walk-ins find new careers in teaching, healing, and counseling, social work, or environmental sciences. So, how to recognize a walk-in? That's not usually easy to do. But if the person that you're looking at exhibits certain characteristics that are different from before, then they may be a walk-in. If the person has gone through a serious injury or illness and a miraculous recovery that has changed them for the better, they may be a walk-in. While miraculous recoveries do happen and people do change for the better on their own, if there is a defining event and the person has radically changed, there could be a walk-in involved. Distinct changes in personality and thought patterns will be noticeable. As I said before, walk-ins are always here for beneficial reasons. So if there's a new willingness in the person to help with other people's problems and to counsel them without expecting personal reward, that would be very typical of a walk-in. If there's a new unwillingness to exchange harmful words, gossip about others, or to complain about or talk about their own problems with others, they may be a walk-in. Walk-ins tend to speak wisely when they are called upon, but they don't push themselves into the public eye or take credit for themselves. Overall, they tend to have a calm demeanor and they are helpful and patient with others. This is one reason that walk-ins may be difficult to identify, because they don't brag about their talents. They just live their lives and do their work. As I mentioned, walk-ins usually take place during adulthood, but these days there seem to be more walk-ins being reported at different stages in life. This may be because more wise old souls are needed on the earth now, and maybe they're coming in via walk-ins. But as I said before, walk-ins are still rare. But I want to share with you some less common types of walk-ins that are reported. This is a type of walk-in that I call change my mind. This happens mostly during the first few months or years of life if the living soul realizes that it's not ready for life in this reality. The earthly soul of a baby may realize that it's not really ready for this life, and it may want to go back to the spirit realm until it's more mature, or it may want to revise its life plan. And if there is another soul able to take over, then this can happen. Now, this type of walk-in is not planned before birth, but it does require two souls, of course, because it's an exchange, and they apparently are able to make an agreement to swap places if the child is very young or maybe possibly even in the womb. Another type of less common walk-in I call I have to be somewhere else. Now, this is similar. It's similar to a walk-in, except it's not usually planned before birth, and it is unexpected. This type of walk-in happens because the original soul has to leave the body unexpectedly, because it's needed somewhere else, either in the soul realm or somewhere else in the universe. This can happen in childhood or later in life. And there are usually noticeable personality and family changes. The older individual, the more difficult this one is to adjust to. Another type is called prepare a place for me. The walked-in soul may be new to incarnating on Earth and not quite ready for the task, and a more advanced old soul may walk in temporarily. There is a theory that souls planning to incarnate in human form take part in creating their own human bodies while they're in the womb. And an inexperienced soul may ask another more experienced soul to take its place temporarily. These types of walk-in souls usually come in with very high vibrations, and they are sometimes known as old souls. Let's share the space is another type. Sometimes two or more souls plan before birth to actually inhabit the same physical body at different stages in its life. Perhaps they don't need an entire lifetime to complete their karma or mission on Earth. This may be diagnosed as multiple personality disorder, although in a walk-in, the new person does not usually need any psychological or medical treatment because they're not suffering from a mental or physical issue. Now, the upgrade feels like a walk-in, but it's not. In an upgrade, a higher version or a higher aspect of the original soul walks in. The person will not notice the types of changes that would take place in a regular walk-in. In a typical walk-in, the living soul leaves, and the new soul takes over the physical body completely. But in an upgrade, a very advanced soul, such as an ascended master, comes into the human body to help the person in their current mission or to contribute some skills or energetic qualities that may be needed in the person's life. The person may notice some changes in their emotional functioning, abilities, perspectives, and beliefs. But it's not really a walk-in because the original soul is still there and is still in charge of its incarnation. Soul infusion, soul layering, soul overlays, wanderer souls, and soul braids are also similar to walk-ins. I'm not going to go into these today because basically they are the same type of events as walk-ins, just a little different in details and form. In a host situation, a human voluntarily shares their body and mind with a human or animal spirit, with spirits of deceased relatives, friends, or lovers from a previous life, while they retain their own consciousness and sense of self in their current life. Now, here, souls are not exchanged, so this is not a walk-in. And it's not a possession either, because it's voluntary. But it can be interpreted, and is often interpreted, as some type of personality disorder. I've mentioned several times before that walk-ins are always beneficial events, and even though there may be confusion while the new soul adapts to the body, they always bring about positive changes in the long runs. However, there are some malicious, non-beneficial events that are similar to walk-ins, and I want to go into those briefly for you. Non-beneficial events are not walk-ins. They feel negative and they cause negative changes in the individual. And they have detrimental effects on the person that do not go away on their own. So some types of non-beneficial events are a soul swaps that is either forced on the living person against its will, or they have an agreement that they made that isn't for their highest good. In this kind of situation, it could be the person makes an agreement with another spirit or a soul for wealth or fame in exchange for their soul. In a backseat driver situation, demons, souls, spirits, or other negative entities are attached to the person and they control them. This is what we also call possession. Body jumps or snatches are other kinds of negative things where beings enter a human body against the owner's will. They push out the original soul and they dominate the body. The living soul is hijacked and forcibly removed from the body. In modern times, walk-ins are usually considered medical or mental health phenomena, and in some cases, that's what they actually are. But there are similarities between the two. Some signs of walk-ins are very similar to common mental and personality disorders. So this can be difficult if the person feels that they need medical assistance or psychological help, and they try to reach out to that and find out that there's something else going on. Disconnects or disassociations between an individual's identity, thoughts, memories, actions, and surroundings are often experienced in walk-ins and in mental illness. For example, dissociative identity disorder, or what we commonly know as multiple personalities, is characterized by the presence of at least two distinct and enduring personality states, very much like some of the walk-ins that we talked about today. Mental issues can break up homes, careers, and lives, like walk-ins reportedly can. Mental and emotional disconnects are usually caused by severe, often persistent trauma. Could be war, natural disaster, or mental or physical abuse, which is again also typical of walk-ins. Walk-ins always happen when there is a defining, very powerful event. Now, mental illness is typically not resolved without some kind of formal treatment or therapy, but walk-ins will eventually adjust and change their lives and move on to pursue a better and healthier future. So, what should you do if you think you're a walk-in. If you have recently experienced a powerful event, how are you feeling physically and emotionally? Are you noticing that unusual changes have happened or that you see radical changes in your life? If you are aware that something radical has happened to you, and if you're having trouble understanding or dealing with it, you should see a medical doctor or a mental health professional to eliminate a possible physical or mental disorder. You should reach out to a sympathetic friend or family member for support, but use good judgment and protect yourself. You might not have a friend or family member you can share with without harsh judgment or ridicule. So you may be on your own for a while. But walk-ins usually get their legs under them fairly quickly. And unless you're actually dealing with something negative and non-beneficial, you probably will too. Remember, a true walk-in is always a good thing. Religion isn't for everyone, of course, but if you have a religious faith, take advantage of it for support. If you don't, try reaching out to something religious or spiritual that you're interested in, as long as it's uplifting and beneficial. Of course, there's often a difference between being religious and being spiritual. But if you're drawn to a particular belief or practice, check it out. And if it's not for you, then move on. You may be experiencing a lot of mental and emotional changes, but as long as they feel positive overall, try to be patient and understand if you can. Walk-ins consistently report that despite confusion and possible anxiety, they always have an underlying knowing that things are okay and are going to continue to be okay, and that they have support from the soul realm, God, creator, higher beings, loving deceased relatives, whoever. The feeling will be real to you. As I've said before, Western science does not accept walk-ins or many other anomalous and unexplainable events that have touched and uplifted humanity since before recorded time. But whether you believe walk-ins exist or not, the radical and positive changes that people report cannot be denied. For anyone in your audience who would like to do more reading about walk-ins or soul exchanges, there are a lot of books out there available, but I've included some of my favorite ones on the topic, and I'm just putting them up on the screen for you now. These are all available on Amazon or probably from other locations as well. So that includes my presentation on walk-ins. Thank you, and I wish you all the very best.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Dave, do you have a bazillion questions like I do? We can,
Roughly.
yeah, go ahead.
I have 7 written down,
Okay.
all of which have about 4 parts follow-up questions.
Well, I'll do the best I can.
No, you kind of answered questions as it progressed. So a lot of them were answered. The first thing that struck me was the parallels to near-death experiences. In that, in those cases, a lot of the times the experiencer reports a change in lifestyle, a change in tastes, motivation to do certain things, and I just want to know what's your how do you compare a new near-death experience with the walk-in phenomena? That's my first question. Or is there a comparison?
Well, technically, no. I bring the near-death experiences and OBEs, or out-of-body experiences, in because they can sometimes appear like that, but over a long period of time, it would be very noticeable that there is a difference, because you're talking about a daily change in a person's life. This is like the woman that I showed at the beginning, that I read her story. You know, she changed her life. She moved to a different city. She divorced her husband. It's very radical. You are right that sometimes in near-death experiences, people receive information or they're given a chance to return. And sometimes they're told, if you go back, then you have to change your life. There may be life reviews where a person can have a look at their life and see if there are changes that they want to make. So a near-death experience could also bring about the change in a person's life, but it would be in a very different way.
Well, I've got more questions, but Dan, why don't you throw one in there or two?
So here's one that came to mind, and it's based on what I know about you. So my knowledge about Gwen has been developed over her interest and the interest I've had in UFOs. So it wasn't necessarily this more spiritual aspect. So the first question is, why are you interested in this?
Well, I don't understand how anyone can look with an open mind and a broad look at what we typically call the UFO experience phenomenon, or abduction, alien abductions, or contact phenomenon, without realizing that there are many similarities. And if you're a therapist, if you're a researcher and you're hearing stories and you're seeing these similarities. In the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit less, I'm seeing more and more of these. And I've always had a strong feeling that there was a consciousness within each one of us, whether you want to call it a soul, whatever. And I also believe that there's probably some kind of universal consciousness. And what I believe that we're seeing when I'm hearing these people tell me their stories that are all kinds of mixed things going on, it just makes sense to me that it all has to be linked together. And I find that really interesting and fascinating. And I also find it a very positive thought. And I hear that from a lot of people.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, I like sports and I play sports and follow them and everything. And so I make a lot of sports metaphors in my mind. And something that came to mind was that the way you're describing the entrance of a different soul or a swap of a soul kind of reminded me of a quarterback calling an audible, where he changes the play. You know, there's a scripted one, but he takes a look at the defense and he says, "Oh, that's not going to work against this defense. So I'm going to call my own play. I'm going to change the play." Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's a kind of a spur of the moment change in the game plan, so to speak. You also might kind of make an analogy between a relief pitcher who comes in at the end of a baseball game, has got a fresh arm and the energy to finish off the game. So what do you think about those kind of analogies? Are those appropriate, or is that of course it's oversimplifying things, but how do you think those fit in this case?
Well, I think it's great. I think I'm not sure that it's that there's anything unreasonable about it at all. There were some different types of walk-ins, the less common ones that I described to you, which sound to me exactly like what you just talked about. Someone coming in when they're needed. Sometimes they come in and they're only there temporarily. Sometimes they're there for just a part of the person's life. Sometimes, mostly in infants, the individual will be born, or the soul will come into a physical form, and they realize they can't do it. For some reason, they can't do it. They just are not ready to go ahead with it. And so they may say, time out, I have to leave. I'm not prepared to do this life. I want to go back. I'd like to go back to the soul realm. I'd like to go back to the creator or to God, and I'd like to wait a while longer. And so then, as I was talking about before, if there is another soul that's available to do a shift at that time or an exchange, then that could happen that way. So yeah, I can see the similarities.
And that brings up a very important question, or the old question debated for millennia: does free will exist or not? Because if we have these change, these game plan changes in the middle of the game, it suggests that things are not written in stone, that things are not predetermined, etc., and that it's a free-flowing, sometimes chaotic relationship that we have with our higher selves and whoever's watching over, whoever's controlling different aspects of these realities. It makes it more interesting to me to learn about that there is some flux and some again, free will. We can make these choices. We can back out of deals. We can make new deals. We can make swaps. I mean, the athletics comparison is really very apt, I think, when you're talking about that. And maybe that's why humans are so interested in sports also. This is something else to think about. But on another aspect of this swap, what happens to the soul that's swapped out? Does he or she go sit on the bench and, have a Gatorade, a cosmic Gatorade or something?
That's very possible. I've never had anybody come and tell me that they went out and they came back and they remembered where they went. What we believe is they just go back to the soul realm,
Right.
because they have agreed to come out because they want out. They are not in a happy place. They're suffering and they need to get out of this earthly experience. And there's another soul there who's made an agreement with them that says, "Oh, I want to be there because I need that. I want to be in the game. You may not like it, but I want to get in there." And so they make this agreement. I do want to remind you, though, that this is a very formal agreement. We believe it's a very formal thing. So it's not like just being able to raise your hand and say, "I want out now." There has to be something happening before that. That's what we believe. That's what walk-ins are said to be. Yeah.
And so there's a trigger event. Why would there be, again, it's kind of a parallel to the near-death experiences, that you don't typically just have one sitting watching TV. It's usually you're drowning or have some other moment of great stress that literally takes you out of body. I mean, that's an out-of-body experience, but a near-death puts you up to the line between life and death. Why do you think it requires that dramatic event?
Because I think it requires basically a physical body to die. Now, death, not everybody really understands what death is. When does it happen? Is it brain death? Is it body death after brain death? What is it? Is it the soul is still in you? Are you dead? So we don't know, but there's something that happens in there that we don't know, we don't fully understand, where a body dies, and it has to die. In order for the body has to die in order to release that soul, so that then the soul that's waiting in the wings can step in.
You presume there's a moment, a small window of opportunity, right? Once we determine when death is, and you're right, that's a controversial subject, even among the most expert doctors and scientists in the world, is we don't quite know how to define death, in terms of brain versus heart versus other bodily processes. But do you think there's a window there where it has to happen? I mean, what facilitates that exchange, do you think?
Yes, something that I mentioned is there is frequently a trial period. The trial period is where the soul that's going to walk in hovers around the living person, and they can go in and out somehow. We don't understand how, but they supposedly can go in and out of a person's consciousness. So I think I mentioned that the living person may feel the presence of the being. They may feel a spirit hovering around them. They may hear something. They may feel something in the body, but this can go on for a few weeks at a time, where the new soul that's going to come in is there. They're there around that person. They're there maybe in somewhere in the consciousness that's very near. And so they can be there. And if the person doesn't want it, the living person has a change of heart, a change of mind. If something happens, they reach something, they see something, they decide they don't want to go through with it, they can always walk out up to a certain point. But all of the things that I've read, everything I've read and all the research about walk-ins is that once you have walked out and somebody else has walked in, it cannot be reversed. However, what is always said is that why would you want to? So the people who are going to, but people do have a chance. Yeah, they would have a chance to stop it, and they can stop it because a walk-in is never a co-opted soul or a possessed soul. So yeah, apparently they can. There may be a little window there, but I think the window is more the trial period time when the person is having feelings about it. Although, you know, the person may not know it's going to happen either. They've already agreed in the soul realm, but in this life, they just know that they're miserable as hell and they would love to be out. And then it happens.
Well, you mentioned possession, which I think is an invitation for Dan to ask his next question.
Why? Because you think I'm possessed, Dave?
Well, I think you're obsessed with possession or something.
Yeah, sometimes.
He asked those questions. That's Dan's realm. But go ahead, Dan. I'm sure you have other questions here.
Well, one thing I was wondering about, Gwen, when you were talking about this soul swap could produce changes in a person with a new soul, could that be like physical changes? I mean, could you literally change your appearance and appear to be somebody different than you were before?
What I understand, and from the couple of few people, I haven't known very many walk-ins or people who I felt that were actually valid walk-ins. Like I said, they're very, very rare. But from them, what I have heard is that the physical body looks the same. But I've heard people say that their hair color changes, or they they feel physically different, and so they begin to be a different person. Sometimes they say that maybe they don't recognize themselves in a mirror, but usually their friends and family would still recognize them. So probably no, you're probably not going to change this actual physiological shape body that the soul comes into. But people do definitely change their bodies after they get a new soul.
Interesting. One other thing that comes to mind, and this is Gwen and I are involved in this program called Opus, and there's some very interesting people. I'm not going to share any names here of people, but one thing you said that really resonated is that some of the people in Opus have some pretty fantastical stories about what's going on with them. And I thought about the degree to which modern science, and you made reference to this several times, just will not accept those kind of stories. I mean, rather than saying somebody had an interesting experience with an ET, somebody would say, well, you really need to have the MMPI because I think you're crazy. And we have a whole list of people in Opus of research people who would be accepting of kind of incredulous stories. So I think that's a very interesting point that you make. It's like modern science is not willing or capable, willing or capable of dealing with this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and I agree. The reason that I talk about the similarities between the two is I think it's important if we want to try to understand this. I mean, who knows if walk-ins are real or not? There's no scientific proof for this, but we've been hearing about them forever. And like I said, there are radical changes that I've seen in a few people, and then I've read a lot about who go through something, and walk-in seems to be the name that has been given to that particular experience. So I'm sorry, would you rephrase the question?
I don't know. I think I was just blabbering on. I just realized that modern science doesn't want to deal with some of this stuff.
Right. Well, they don't know how to.
Yeah, probably.
And so they prefer to just help. And, sometimes we badmouth the science when we're in this field. The science is good, and there are a lot of wonderful psychologists, psychiatrists, other kinds of mental health professionals, and researchers who really want to help people. They just don't understand how to do it. They don't know how to do it. And so I think it's important for those of us who are trying to understand this and trying to learn more about these anomalous things and what they are and if they're real. If we look at that, though, I think it's important for us to realize that somebody might be mentally ill. Maybe they don't have a walk-in. Maybe they have not been walked in. They are just mentally ill. Maybe they're schizophrenic. Maybe they have dissociative disorders or things of that nature. Not that kind of stuff it can't pass, that it can't go both ways. So I think it's important that we realize that too. But I also wanted to make the point that it's very different, because if you have a true mental illness, a disorder, you need help. Most people cannot recover from anything like that without serious formal therapy or treatment. A walk-in basically doesn't need anybody. Maybe needs someone to talk to, some support, but there's nothing wrong with them mentally. So they don't have to go through that. Eventually, things are gonna level out and they're gonna be okay.
I'm reminded of a previous guest that we had, Joanne DiMaggio, who I really enjoyed. She's a past life regressionist, and she talks about soul contracts, where life is basically a school, and we come here to learn certain lessons, and we pick our friends, and we pick our parents, and all that kind of stuff. It seems like this soul swap could be part of a soul contract that you decide on before you come to this physical plane. What do you think of that?
Well, a walk-in is a soul contract. It's an agreement. It's agreement between two souls who come into this earth plane that they're gonna swap at some point. Yeah, so I would say that it's exactly the same thing. It's just different names.
Okay. All right, Dave, back to you.
Hmm. Well, now I'm a little bit confused because we talked about free will and everything, and predetermined lifetimes and all that. And of course, there's no way to answer it, but I wonder if it could be both. Could it be a rescue mission? The walk-in comes in when things get too too tricky for a human soul, going through his or her earthly life. Kind of an impromptu, like I said, an audible, where you change the play from what you intended. And also you can have predetermined swaps as an agreement, on the table before we enter this world. I mean, do you think it's flexible enough that all those possibilities might be, what's happening in certain cases?
Yes, I do. And I think just because two souls make a contract in the soul realm before one of them is born on this earth, that doesn't mean that that has to happen. I explained to that when I mentioned that the person could back out of it if they wanted to. So I don't see a contract as anything, that's going to limit people. I don't think it limits free will at all. To me, it's free will. It's just free will in another area of our consciousness. But as far as walk-ins, I don't know. Maybe it would be possible for someone to just say, I just can't stand it anymore. Please help me. And I know, and I'm sure we all have known people, or maybe ourselves, we've experienced it, where we just are in such a dire situation that we have to reach out to someone. We pray, or we meditate, or we just say, oh my God, help me. Well, and then something happens. Maybe it doesn't happen that moment, but it happens and we do find relief. So is that a walk-in? Well, no, I wouldn't call that a walk-in, but
Yeah, of course. That's
I think you're right. Yeah.
reasonable possibility. And really my final question is, before Dan mentioned that you were coming on to talk about walk-ins, I have to admit I had never even heard the term before. Of course, I've been involved in UFOs and NDEs and OBEs and every other facet of consciousness, but I hadn't heard of walk-in. So I'm wondering, why was walk-in proposed as an alternative to NDE and OBE? Was there just a category of experiences that was different enough from all those other ones that a new category had to be theorized and and proposed and fit into the spectrum here? Was it there just a need for something that didn't fit all those other ones? Is that where this phenomenon originated, or this term, I guess?
I don't think it was probably that organized or that thought out. These things have been happening to people down, before recorded time, as we've mentioned. And somewhere along the way, we believe that the first person to coin the phrase walk-in was Ruth Montgomery in her book that I mentioned before. She's the one who coined the phrase, and that's it. It became part of the popular language at that point. Because it's kind of a walk-in type thing, somebody walks in, somebody walks out. I don't think that, and I think perhaps the reason that you're not as familiar with it is because if you haven't looked into spiritual things, and I don't mean that you're not a spiritual person, but if you haven't done research in different kinds of spiritual things or read about them, then you may not have heard of walk-ins before. But walk-ins have been around since forever. And I would imagine that Dan would, perhaps being more familiar in that area, would probably have heard of them before. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, so no, I don't think anybody said, oh, let's call it this. Although Ruth Montgomery in her book, she's apparently the one who came up with the first term. In the past, it's been called many other things, like I said, soul bridge, soul exchange, soul swaps.
Yeah, and there may be commonalities between all of these different, what we're calling different phenomena, of course, but we know underlying they're similar. Maybe they have different triggers or different motivations or different agreements, different contracts. But I mean, you could argue that an NDE is a predetermined thing. Maybe even you could combine it with another soul coming in at that moment or whatever. So I wouldn't exclude any possible combination of these events. But I just wondered, because I hadn't heard that before, and I kept asking Dan, what's a walk-in, Dan? And he said, well, you'll have to wait till Gwen comes on. And you did a great job of explaining, elucidating on it, and now I feel smarter because of it. And luckily for our audience, as Dan mentioned at the beginning of the show, Gwen will be on as a regular guest. We're hoping. And she
not just a guest, she's
not a guest,
a co-host.
Sorry, a host and maybe a guest, but she obviously has a very good grasp of all of these topics and is very skilled and will be a great interviewer also. So we're looking forward to that. Definitely. I don't know if it's going to be all three of us. Probably be all three of us as hosts at sometimes, because we've done the triple host thing before. It may be Dan and Gwen or me and Gwen, but you can look forward to Gwen's expertise in the future too. And I'm looking forward to that.
So I have one more question before we let Gwen go. So, and you kind of referenced this when you talked about demonic possession. So could the soul swap be between a human and a non-human entity? And I'm making an assumption here that non-human entities have souls. I'm thinking of like ETs. So what would you say about that?
Some people believe, and actually this was included in the free study. There was a question about, have you had an experience where you believe that you have traded or swapped your soul with an alien soul? Mm-hmm. And there were only a couple of questions on that. And I can't recall the statistics, the numbers of that, but there were people who believe that. So yes, maybe it's possible to do some kind of a walk-in that way also. Demonic possession, or as I mentioned, basically walk-ins are always beneficial. They're always positive. They help them from the soul realm. The soul realm is from the creator. The creator is consciousness, and that is positive. It's not always wonderful. It's not always easy to understand, but it's always a positive, life-affirming kind of experience. Demonic possession, what we call non-beneficial or negative things, are not positive. They are not positive, and they are never positive. So I believe you certainly could be possessed by a demonic entity, or an entity that you might be considered evil. I don't know. I don't think it would be a walk-in though, because I don't think anyone would ever agree in advance to experience something like that. Now, maybe they would if that was part of a journey, some of their karma or a life plan that they felt that they needed to do. So, but as far as just talking about the subject and the way that we describe walk-ins, we typically kind of keep those non-beneficial things separate from that. Does that answer?
It does. It does. Thank you. And I want to echo Dave's thanks for being on with us today and being willing to become part of our team, so to speak. And as we end it's okay to end the recording, Dave, but I have a suggestion I want to make to the both of you as a possible program for Gwen to come on with us again. So once again, thanks so much, Gwen, for your time and very interesting stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
We'll see
Yeah.
you soon.